Now, I've got a great guest in the studio with me today, Dr. Gina Zurlo, all the way from the United States of America. She is a Christianity specialist, a scholar in residence at Harvard Divinity School. She's been named one of the BBC's 100 most influential and inspiring women for her work in studying religious statistics. I knew I was going to trip up on that word. And in particular, the future of religion worldwide. She's currently in New Zealand, speaking tomorrow at a Missions Interlink Masterclass on Christianity, the global perspective, where she will share findings from her research into the growth of Christianity around the world. Gina, good morning.
So good to be here.
Lovely.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, lovely to have you here. You're a very well accomplished lady, reading all the things that you do. And I have to say, I don't think I've ever had a Christianity specialist in my studio before. You kind of feel after a number of years of broadcasting that you might have someone, so it's great to have you here.
Yeah.
Hey, Gina, when you were a young girl, did you ever look ahead and think, when I grow up, I want to be a Christianity specialist?
Well, that's so interesting because whenever anyone asks me, how did you get into this work? I say, no little girl says, I want to be a demographer of religion when I grow up. So you beat me to the punch of my own joke. So thanks.
I'm the same way.
I think so.
I think it's the curly hair.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Yes. Yes. No, it's true. It was definitely not something I knew existed until I started my master's work at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. And that's where I bumped into the Center for the Study of Global Christianity, all purely by accident.
Ah, okay. You bumped into it by accident, and you've been pretty busy since. Now, with your studies, you say that you study every religion in the world, in the past, present, and future. That got me thinking: are you something a bit like Doctor who's a time traveler? Like, do you get in your TARDIS? Like, how do you cover all that ground?
Yeah, well, it does feel like that a little bit. Honestly, it's a pretty big research agenda for a pretty small operation. But fortunately, we're taking a pretty specific methodological angle. So we're looking at religious affiliation and adherence of every religion in every country of the world. So I'm not a theologian, right? I'm not studying the texts of every major world religion, but I can tell you how many Buddhists there are in Norway or how many Muslims in Indonesia.
How many are there?
Okay, well, now that I say that, I don't have every variable. Millions of numbers in the database are not all in my head, but I can look it up in the World Religion Database for you.
Right, the World Religion Database.
Yes.
So such a thing.
Yes.
And New Zealand's in there?
Absolutely. Yes, one of 237 countries.
Wow.
Every country.
Yeah. And so in terms of being a Christianity specialist, does that really help inform your work, having that breadth and depth and seeing what's happening in all religions?
Yeah, absolutely, because Christianity exists in its cultural, historical, societal, and religious context. And that's why it's really important for us not just to report on Christian trends, but to make sure we're aware of what's happening in all the world religions and how Christianity fits into that.
Yeah, I think people would take it a little bit more seriously, wouldn't they, knowing that you're looking broader?
Yeah, and for us, from a demographic perspective, every country's population has to add up to how many people are in that country. So by looking at all of the world religions, we can give you a more robust and holistic view of what's happening in a country.
Yeah. So I know you talking about coming here. I've been reading some of the information about you coming. Some of your findings are sure to surprise and encourage us. I like the sound of that.
Oh, yeah?
What good news can you share with us about the growth of Christianity?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we really try to emphasize is the demographic shift of Christianity to the global south.
Okay.
So from the year 1900 to today, and our projections into the future is that the world is around 1/3 Christian. So about 33% of the world is Christian.
Wow, that's higher than I thought.
Yeah, it is. And there are some uncertainties going forward into the future that could increase that percentage. But the main story over the 20th century is a demographic shift to the global south, that there are now more Christians in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania than there are in Europe and North America. So a lot of people think that Christianity is a Western religion.
Yes.
And I can understand historically why they may say that, but demographically, it's not. It's a religion of the majority world.
Okay. So, I mean, because when we have here in New Zealand, I guess you have things similar in the States. It happens once every 4 years. It's called a census, and they sort of pull information from that, and that tends to show. I think the last one, that Christianity is declining in the West. Does that kind of fit?
Yeah, that is generally the trend in the West, is one of demographic decline. But I do like to nuance it a little bit with the migration trend.
Okay.
So every major Western city now has migrants from all around the world, a large proportion of whom are Christians and are setting up churches in all of these cities. They can be a little hard to track and to find for researchers like us, but there are scholars who are doing this on the ground research,
Hmm.
essentially on foot, trying to locate these new Christian communities in these cities.
That's interesting because I'm thinking back to, well, particularly when my son, who's now 20, but when he was at primary school, a very multicultural school that he went to, absolutely loved it. I loved that he was in that setting that represents the world, that we live in. And he had quite a few Korean friends, and quite a lot of them, their parents were pastors.
Yep.
And so I've seen a lot of that with Korean people coming to New Zealand, setting up. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Migrants setting up churches.
Yeah, and that trend is happening everywhere. A lot of people who are on the move, even for economic reasons, they do have kind of a missional spirit about them. And so they're coming into major Western cities, setting up churches, becoming business owners, becoming leaders in their communities. So that is really complexifying the narrative of decline. It's not just decline, it's change.
Yeah. So when these migrant churches set up, are they statistically, or I managed to say that word, are they actually attracting their own kind, or are they reaching into the countries that they're now part of?
That's a great question. Generally, as of now, these communities are more insular. So, for example, there's a lot of Nigerian and Ghanaian Pentecostal churches in Italy.
Okay.
Tons, hundreds. I mean, at least 500 each congregations of Nigerians and Ghanaian Pentecostals. But it's not Italians who are attending these Ghanaian and Pentecostal churches. Generally, it's fellow Ghanaians and Nigerians. So we do see a little bit of an insular aspect of it, but it remains to be seen going forward what could happen.
Yeah. And the work that you do, what's the thing that kind of excites you the most?
Oh, there are so many things.
What are some of the things?
Some of the things. Well, I've been doing a lot of research on women in world Christianity, and there are a lot of really exciting, encouraging trends in women in world Christianity.
Tell us about that.
So one is that generally all of the data show that women are more religious than men when you look at rates of prayer, religious service attendance, faith transmission to the next generation, self-identification as religious. It's women who are leading the way. Unfortunately, women have not always been recognized as faith leaders in institutions or even in families, but women are really central to the continuation of faith to the next generation. So it's been really encouraging to do this global research to see all of the amazing ways that women are serving, whether in official positions or not. If they're excluded from a formal position, they're finding another way to still be influential. And it's just been really inspiring to see all of the creativity that exists out there.
I think of when I was a young girl and the church I went to, I remember being somewhere, sort of like a lunch fellowship thing, and people were talking and somebody said something about Job, and I was 12 years old, and I piped up and I said, and I shared this little insight, this knowledge that I had. And I remember, it's tragic. I remember sitting there and thinking, it really sucks that I'm a girl because I can't speak, I can't preach, because in those days, no woman did.
Yeah.
It was just men sitting up on there and women didn't have a voice. And then sort of fast forward 10 years later, I'm in this other church setting, and there's a woman up there preaching, and she's leading the worship. And I'm like, what? Is this the real thing? So, women have had to overcome all of that, haven't they?
Yeah, and that's all around the world. I mean, there are women who are feeling that call to preach and to lead and to serve their churches in this way. And in some places, they have a great opportunity to do so and lots of support. In other places, there are lots of challenges and obstacles in their way.
Yeah.
And so to watch these women utterly determined to live out the call that they feel called to do and just going up against those barriers, being supported by fellow women and by men too, to become the first, these female firsts, to be the first priest, to be the first pastor, to be the first executive, whatever it is. And then once you have that first, it just opens the door for the next generation so that no little girl has to have that experience that you had, because now there's a model.
I touched on my introduction of you where you talked about being Well, I talked about you being one of BBC's 100 most influential, inspiring women. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting story. It came out of the blue. I was working on a research project as a postdoc at the Center for Mind and Culture in Boston, the project was about using computer modeling and simulation to make new demographic projections for religion worldwide.
Okay.
And so they were doing this whole female future trend for the BBC 100 Women. So they reached out to the research center and said, "Do you have any women working on your project?" And I was it. So they said, "We do actually have a demographer." And so they reached out to me and they said, "Do you want to come and give a talk at the BBC 100 Women?" And they vetted me and I said, "Sure." I did not actually know that meant I was one of the 100 women. I thought I was just coming to give a talk at the 100 Women consultation. So a few weeks later, the article came out listing the 100 most influential women in the world. And I was scrolling and I saw my face on it. And I was in bed and I hit my husband. I said, "Chris, I am one of the women."
You are.
I am.
That's so good. I absolutely love that. Hey, something in your research, when I actually had a bit of a look on, actually give us the name of your website because there's lots of interesting information there.
Yeah, you can go to globalchristianity.org or my own website, ginazurlo.com.
Yeah, ginazurlo.com was the one I was on. And it talked about that, you talked about that the future of Christianity was women in Africa. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my mentor, Dana Robert, the mission historian and world Christianity scholar, for many decades has been talking about how the average Christian in the world is a woman in the global south. And so I kind of took this on and from a demographic perspective, really thought about this quantitatively to say, is that really the case?
Can I just interrupt? What's the global south?
Yeah, so the Global South is a term the United Nations uses to describe Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Oceania.
Cool.
Not a perfect designation, but the one that we currently use.
Sure.
And so I started thinking about this statement from Dana Robert and then thinking of the future of Christianity. Sub-Saharan Africa is in many ways the demographic center. You have Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Kenya with huge Christian populations. And if you think about the trends from a gendered perspective, women are really leading the charge in these churches at the grassroots ground level. So I wrote this article for The Conversation about African women as the future of the faith to really encourage people to start listening to African women.
Nice.
African women are writing theology. They are in leadership, and we need to be really looking to them to see what are the things we should be thinking about. What are the things we should be theologizing about? What are the things we should be acting on?
Hey, so, and also at the moment, just changing tact, you're in residence at Harvard Divinity School in the USA. What does that encompass?
Yeah, so Harvard Divinity School is the largest multi-religious divinity school in the world. So we have Buddhist students, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, non-religious, all together there on our little campus in Cambridge. And I'm there as a world Christianity scholar to really get people to start thinking about what Christianity looks like now. That it's not a Western European faith, that it is global, that the shift has happened. And I've been so welcomed there and have been so delighted that people are interested in the global Christian story. My students really want to know, what is lived Christian experience like outside of my own context, outside of the USA? And so we've just been journeying through this global Christian history together and exploring what the contours of the faith look like now.
Wow, you have a fascinating life.
Never a dull moment when you do work around the world.
That's very cool. So I know you were speaking last night at an event and you're going to be speaking tomorrow here in Auckland, and it's a Christian Global Perspective, a masterclass. My understanding is that it's taking place at St Margaret's Anglican Church in Hillsborough from 10 to 2:30. It's actually a free event, but people are asked, to come and bring a koha, and it'll be a wonderful opportunity to learn from Dr. Gina Zurlo. So lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you can catch all our interviews on Star. See you next time.